Walk through almost any major city on Earth today, and you can probably find it. A circle of dough covered with tomato, cheese, and whatever else the local population has decided belongs on top. Pizza feels so universal that it is easy to imagine it has always existed. But the pizza we recognize today came from a much more specific world. It grew in crowded neighborhoods where many people needed food that was cheap, filling, and fast. It was sold to workers in the streets of Naples. It was carried across the Atlantic by Italian immigrants. And eventually, this simple meal escaped its hometown and became one of the most recognizable foods on the planet. But to understand how that happened, we have to go back long before anyone called it pizza. Humans have been putting things on flat pieces of bread for thousands of years. Across the ancient Mediterranean and Near East, bread was one of the foundations of everyday life. Grain could be ground into flour, mixed with water, shaped into dough, and cooked on hot surfaces or inside primitive ovens. Flatbreads were practical. They were portable, relatively inexpensive, and could be eaten with oils, herbs, cheese, or other available ingredients. Ancient Greeks ate various flatbreads. Romans had their own forms of bread served with toppings and accompaniments. Similar ideas appeared across different cultures. But these were not yet the pizza that would conquer the world. One crucial ingredient was still missing: the tomato. Tomatoes originated in the Americas. Europeans did not encounter them until voyages across the Atlantic connected Europe and the Americas after the late 15th century. When tomatoes reached Europe during the 16th century, they were unfamiliar, exotic, and sometimes viewed with suspicion. Europeans already knew other members of the nightshade family, and tomatoes did not immediately become an everyday food everywhere they appeared. For some wealthy Europeans, they were curiosities or ornamental plants before they became common ingredients. But in southern Italy, something important eventually happened. People began eating them. By the 18th century, Naples was one of Europe's great cities, but its grandeur existed alongside severe poverty. Its streets were crowded with laborers, sailors, craftsmen, vendors, beggars, and families living in cramped conditions. Many working people needed meals that required little money, little preparation, and preferably no dining room at all. And that environment was perfect for pizza. Naples already had a tradition of inexpensive flatbreads. Bakers could stretch dough into thin rounds, add simple ingredients, and cook them quickly in extremely hot ovens. Tomatoes changed what could go on top. The result was inexpensive, flavorful, portable, and filling. Early Neapolitan pizzas were not overloaded with dozens of toppings. They could be remarkably simple: dough with oil or lard, garlic, salt, small fish, cheese, or tomato, depending on the seller and the customer. And crucially, pizza was associated with ordinary people. Imagine Naples in the early 19th century. Narrow streets run between tall buildings. Laundry hangs overhead. Vendors shout over one another. Carts squeeze through crowds. Smoke drifts from ovens. Somewhere nearby, dough hits a hot stone floor. A worker does not need a table, silverware, or an expensive dining room. He needs something he can buy and eat. Pizza fits perfectly. Vendors sold pizzas from shops and through the streets. For poor Neapolitans, this was not exotic cuisine, it was practical food. And that is one of the great ironies of pizza's history. A dish that would eventually generate enormous global businesses began as food strongly associated with the urban poor. Visitors noticed. In the 19th century, writers describing Naples commented on the city's pizza sellers and the people who lived on inexpensive foods like pizza. But pizza's identity was becoming more defined. Tomato was increasingly important. Cheese could be added. Garlic, oil, anchovies, and other ingredients created recognizable combinations. Then came one of the most famous stories in pizza history. According to the popular legend, in 1889, King Umberto I and Queen Margherita visited Naples. A pizzaiolo named Raffaele Esposito supposedly prepared pizzas for the royal couple. One version, topped with tomato, mozzarella, and basil, displayed the red, white, and green colors associated with the Italian flag. The Queen supposedly loved it, and the pizza was named Margherita in her honor. It is a perfect story. A poor person's street food enters a royal world, wins over a queen, and becomes a national symbol. It is also much messier than the legend suggests. Pizza topped with ingredients resembling tomato, mozzarella, and basil existed before 1889, and historians have questioned parts of the neat royal origin story. The margherita was not simply invented from nothing for a queen, but the legend survived because it captured something that really was happening. Pizza was changing status, and soon an even bigger transformation would begin. Between the late 19th and early 20th centuries, millions of Italians left their homeland. Many were escaping poverty and searching for work and opportunity. Large numbers crossed the Atlantic to the United States, settling in cities including New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago. They carried their food traditions with them. Pizza crossed the ocean. At first, it largely remained connected to Italian immigrant communities. In neighborhoods filled with Italian bakeries, groceries, restaurants, and street life, pizza made sense. It was familiar. Outside those communities, many Americans had little idea what it was. That would change. New York became one of the most important places in pizza's second life. Coal and gas-fired ovens, American ingredients, local tastes, and the economics of a growing city helped pizza evolve into new forms. One of the names most often associated with early American pizza is Gennaro Lombardi, whose establishment in Manhattan became famous as an early licensed pizzeria in the United States in the early 20th century. Whether any single shop deserves to be called the absolute beginning is less important than the larger transformation happening around it. Pizza was becoming American, and America did not merely copy Naples, it began changing the food. Different ovens produced different crusts, different cheeses became available, portions changed, toppings multiplied, regional preferences developed. Then the 20th century gave pizza another enormous push. During and after the Second World War, Americans became increasingly familiar with Italian food. Returning servicemen, expanding Italian-American communities, rising incomes, suburbanization, automobile culture, and a growing restaurant industry all helped move pizza beyond the neighborhoods where it had first taken root. By the 1950s, pizza was no longer simply an immigrant food hiding inside Italian enclaves. It was becoming mainstream, and once that happened, businesses saw an opportunity. Pizza had several advantages that made it almost perfectly designed for the modern food economy. It could be made relatively quickly. It could feed multiple people. It could be customized. It could be cut into equal portions. And most importantly, it traveled surprisingly well. Put it inside a box and dinner could come to you. The humble flatbread of Naples was about to become a delivery machine. After the Second World War, pizza restaurants and chains expanded across the United States. Companies standardized recipes, kitchens, menus, and eventually delivery systems. Pizza could now be reproduced at scale. Instead of depending entirely on the instincts of one baker, a business could specify how much dough to use, how much sauce to spread, how much cheese to add, how long to bake it, and how the finished product should be packaged. This was a major turning point. Pizza was no longer just a dish. It was becoming a system. And systems can spread. Chicago developed its famous deep dish traditions, turning pizza into something thick, heavy, and almost pie-like, compared with a classic Neapolitan pizza. New York became famous for large, thin slices that could be folded and eaten on the move. Detroit developed rectangular pizza with a thick, airy crust and crisp, caramelized cheese around the edges. Elsewhere, communities created their own interpretations. The further pizza traveled from Naples, the less anyone seemed willing to leave it alone. And that became its greatest strength. Pizza could absorb local tastes almost anywhere. In one country, seafood might appear on top. In another, corn. Elsewhere, kebab meat, eggs, potatoes, mayonnaise, unusual cheeses, local sausages, or sauces that would have horrified generations of Neapolitan traditionalists. Perhaps no topping demonstrates this better than pineapple. Hawaiian pizza was not invented in Hawaii or Italy. It is widely credited to Sam Panopoulos, a Greek-born restaurateur in Canada who experimented with canned pineapple on pizza in Ontario in the 1960s. A Greek immigrant in Canada put tropical fruit on an Italian-derived food and created one of the most internationally debated pizzas ever made. That sounds almost absurd. But it perfectly represents what pizza had become: global food. By the late 20th century, pizza was appearing almost everywhere. Frozen pizza transformed it again. Now you did not even need a pizzeria. Industrial food companies could manufacture pizzas, freeze them, transport them hundreds or thousands of kilometers, stack them inside supermarkets, and let customers finish the cooking at home. The refrigerator and freezer had completed a transformation that a Neapolitan street vendor could hardly have imagined. Pizza had gone from something cooked and eaten almost immediately to something that could wait for weeks or months inside a cardboard box. Then came another revolution: the internet. Ordering pizza had always suited delivery culture, but online ordering and smartphones removed even more friction. A customer could select a size, crust, sauce, cheese, and toppings without speaking to anyone. Then an algorithm could send the order to a kitchen, a screen could tell workers what to prepare, and software could coordinate payment and delivery. The meal that once depended on a street vendor shouting through Naples could now arrive because someone touched a picture on a piece of glass. Yet something strange happened as pizza became increasingly industrial. People also became more interested in its origins. Traditional Neapolitan pizza gained international prestige. Pizzaioli emphasized long-fermented dough, intensely hot ovens, specific ingredients and techniques passed from one generation to another. In Naples, pizza making was not simply fast food. It was craft, identity, and local culture. In 2017, UNESCO added the art of the Neapolitan pizzaiuolo to its list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Think about that transformation. A food associated with ordinary people in the streets of Naples had traveled across oceans, been transformed by immigrants, industrialized by corporations, frozen in factories, delivered through smartphone apps, and then recognized internationally as a cultural tradition worth preserving. And pizza is still changing. Today, one pizza might be made in Naples with tomato, mozzarella, basil, and a blistered crust, after barely more than a minute in an extremely hot oven. Another might emerge from a conveyor oven in an American chain restaurant. Another might be topped with ingredients inspired by Korean, Indian, Swedish, Brazilian, Turkish, or Japanese cuisine. They can look so different that it seems ridiculous to give them the same name. But underneath them is the same remarkably adaptable idea: bread, heat, something on top, and people making that combination fit their own world. That may be the real reason pizza conquered the planet. It was never protected by simplicity. It survived through change. The people of Naples turned inexpensive ingredients into practical street food. Italian migrants carried that food into new cities. American restaurants transformed it for new customers. Businesses figured out how to mass-produce and deliver it. Other cultures then pulled pizza apart and rebuilt it according to their own tastes. Every stage changed what came before. So the next time a pizza box opens and the smell of hot bread, tomato, and melted cheese fills the room, you are looking at more than dinner. You are looking at centuries of migration, trade, technology, poverty, entrepreneurship, and cultural exchange compressed into a circle of dough. Pizza did not conquer the world because everyone agreed on how it should be made. It conquered the world because they didn't.